Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take those dense piles of research and turn them into actionable insights you can use, well, immediately. I'm your host.
And I'm your expert for today.
Yeah.
It's genuinely great to be here. And I love that mission you just laid out, because today we are tackling a topic that, it often gets reduced to just a few confusing letters.
Oh, yeah. LDL, HDL, triglycerides.
Exactly. But what we're really talking about dictates the long-term health of our most vital organ. We are talking about cholesterol.
Absolutely. For most people, I think cholesterol is that thing you get checked once a year, right? And you just hope the numbers are good enough so you can, forget about it for another 11 months. We hear the warnings. We all know high cholesterol is bad for the heart, but we treat it like a scoreboard. If we hit the target, we win the health game for the year.
That passive approach is exactly what we need to disrupt today. Because the simple truth is, while that basic lipid panel is the starting line, it is absolutely nowhere near the finish line of understanding your true cardiovascular risk.
Yeah.
We really need to move beyond just mass concentration and start talking about things like particle count and even genetics.
So our goal today is to make sure that when you leave this deep dive, you are equipped to have a dramatically more informed conversation with your doctor.
That's the mission.
All right, let's unpack this. Our mission today. Decode cholesterol and map out lifelong heart strategies, all based on the latest science. We've pulled together a stack of sources: clinical studies, cardiology perspectives, nutritional guides.
And that includes some great accessible insights from resources like bfit.ai.
Right. Which, by the way, is a fantastic free source for clear, practical fitness, nutrition, and wellness articles. It really helps make this kind of detailed information, immediately actionable.
That accessibility is just so key, because before we can dive into the advanced stuff, we have to lay the foundation.
The basics.
The basics. If you've ever had an annual physical, you already know the foundation. The standard lipid panel.
And what are those 4 key figures we are all used to seeing on that lab printout?
So the standard test always gives you 4 data points. First, there's total cholesterol.
Okay, that's the big number at the top.
Yeah, the sum total of all the cholesterol circulating in your blood. Second, you have LDL, or low-density lipoprotein.
The bad one.
The notorious bad cholesterol, yeah, because it's the one that deposits plaque in the arteries. Third is HDL, high-density lipoprotein.
And that's the good cholesterol.
The so-called good one, right. It's responsible for shuttling excess cholesterol back to the liver to be removed.
Okay.
And finally, you've got triglycerides, which are another type of fat in the blood. They represent stored energy, but they're a significant risk factor when they get too high.
And for decades, the entire conversation around heart health has been centered on just those 4 numbers. The main goal was always getting that LDL below a certain threshold.
Usually 100 or 130, depending on your personal risk factors. And those numbers are important. I want to be clear about that.
Of course. They're a starting point.
They are the initial screening tool. But what we are emphasizing today, and what the research just screams, is that these standard measures often give us a really incomplete picture. They don't always tell the whole story.
And relying only on them can lead to some pretty significant blind spots.
Huge blind spots in assessing your real risk.
Okay, so let's jump into section 1 by taking that holistic view you mentioned. When people focus only on those cholesterol scores, what are the huge interconnected factors they're just completely forgetting about?
Oh, they're forgetting that the cardiovascular system operates within this complex ecosystem. Cholesterol doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
It's constantly interacting with stress, which is a massive physiological factor that elevates hormones that are harmful to your arteries. It interacts with inflammation, that silent systemic low-grade irritation that damages arterial walls.
And then the big ones.
And of course, critically, it interacts with physical activity, genetics, and diet. All these elements combine to create a risk profile that's completely unique to you.
So you could have a perfect LDL number on paper.
Exactly. But if you have high systemic inflammation because of, say, poor sleep or chronic stress, your arteries are still under attack.
That's the crucial context. And this context, it leads us to that aha moment from our sources. The idea that 2 people, let's call them Jane and Mike, they could walk into a clinic with the exact same LDL score.
Let's say 120 mg/dL.
Okay, 120. But their actual risk for a heart attack could be worlds apart. How is that possible? How can identical cholesterol mass lead to such drastically different risks?
It all boils down to what LDL actually measures versus what heart disease is actually caused by. Historically, we've measured LDL cholesterol concentration.
The mass.
The mass. Think of it this way. We're measuring the total weight of the cholesterol cargo moving through your blood vessels.
Okay.
The problem is that weight doesn't tell you how that weight is distributed.
Right. I love the analogy you use for this. The fleet of trucks carrying the cargo.
Exactly. So imagine Jane has an LDL score of 120. Her 120 might be carried by, say, 800 large, fluffy, buoyant lipoprotein particles. Think of them as big, soft trucks.
And those are less likely to cause a traffic jam.
They're much less likely to get jammed in the small spaces of the artery wall. Now, Mike also has an LDL score of 120, same total weight. But his 120 is carried by 1,200 small, dense, hard trucks. These smaller particles are much more prone to penetrating the delicate lining of the arterial wall.
So the risk of plaque formation atherosclerosis, it isn't determined by the total mass of the cargo at all.
Not primarily.
It's about the sheer number of times those transport vehicles collide with and burrow into the artery wall.
Precisely. That's why we need to transition from measuring the concentration to measuring the count. We need to know how many vehicles are in the fleet, not just the total weight of what they're carrying.
And this is where advanced testing comes in.
This is where advanced testing steps in, providing a completely different dimension of insight.
Okay, let's introduce the first and maybe the most important of those advanced risk markers, the one that directly addresses this particle count issue.
That would be apolipoprotein B, or just ApoB. ApoB is a protein that sits on the surface of most of the atherogenic, so the plaque-causing lipoproteins, including LDL. Now, here's the key part. Every single one of those potentially dangerous particles contains exactly one ApoB molecule.
Oh, wow.
So measuring ApoB is functionally the same as counting the total number of plaque-causing particles in your circulation.
So ApoB is the head count of the high-risk particles.
It is the head count, yes. And the source material is unequivocal on this. ApoB is now considered by many leading cardiologists and lipid researchers to be a more accurate predictor of cardiovascular events.
Things like heart attacks and strokes.
Exactly. More accurate than LDL concentration alone. And this is so critical because you could have a seemingly optimal LDL score, but a dangerously high ApoB.
Which would lead to a totally false sense of security.
Completely false. We call that discordance, when the LDL number and the particle count just don't match up.
That discordance is terrifying. Especially for someone who's worked hard on their diet, they see a good LDL score and they think they're in the clear.
But they're still facing a high underlying risk.
Wow. But ApoB isn't the only advanced marker we need to talk about. There's another one that is deeply genetic and can act as a major wildcard in heart risk.
That's lipoprotein, or LPA. This is fundamentally different from ApoB, or regular LDL.
How so?
LPA is often described as an altered version of LDL, and its levels are almost entirely determined by your genes. We're talking 70 to 90% determined by inherited factors.
That sounds tricky. If it's genetic, why is it such a potent risk factor? And I guess the bigger question is, why can't I just diet and exercise it away?
You're hitting on the key difficulty with LPA. It is particularly dangerous because of its structure. Not only does it act like a plaque-causing particle,
Like a normal LDL particle.
right, but it also contains a structure called apolipoprotein, which promotes thrombosis or clot formation.
Oh, wow.
So elevated LPA is linked both to building the plaque and to making the existing plaque unstable and prone to clotting.
And that clotting is the immediate cause of most heart attacks and strokes.
That's the catastrophic event.
So it's a double whammy. It helps lay the groundwork for the disease, and then it makes the actual event more likely.
Exactly. And because it's so genetically determined, lifestyle changes typically have a minimal impact on lowering LPA levels. You might reduce your regular LDL substantially through diet.
But the LPA might stay stubbornly high.
It often does, and this is why it's so often missed on standard tests. Yet high LPA is linked to a significantly higher risk of early heart disease. If there is heart disease in your family tree that struck people young, LPA testing is absolutely essential.
Let's really dedicate some time to this core scientific debate, the particle count versus concentration, because this feels like the biggest single takeaway in terms of understanding the science.
We really need to solidify the distinction. LDL concentration is the mass, the weight. ApoB is the number of circulating particles.
Right.
And the reason particle count matters more goes back to the cellular level. Plaque buildup starts when those lipoprotein particles penetrate the inner lining of the artery, the endothelium.
So if you have more particles circulating,
You increase the frequency of penetration attempts.
it's purely a numbers game based on exposure. More trucks means more chances for a collision and subsequent damage.
That's the simplest way to put it. And we can bring in the crucial perspective of Dr. Alan Snyderman here. He, along with others, really pioneered this understanding of ApoB's importance.
And his insight is foundational.
It is. He said, it's not just how much cholesterol you carry, but how many particles are circulating in your blood. ApoB testing provides the clearest view of that risk. This is the paradigm shift that has taken decades to be fully adopted into clinical practice.
We're moving from a focus on the bulk chemical measure, the LDL,
To the biological risk measure, the ApoB.
So if I'm optimizing for long-term health, and I have a doctor who only orders the standard lipid panel, I need to really push them to include the ApoB test. Is it generally available now?
It is widely available, yes, though sometimes you have to specifically ask for it. And the insight it gives you is just invaluable. If your LDL is high, but your ApoB is relatively low.
It means you have bigger, fluffier particles.
Larger, less dense particles, and your risk is lower than that sheer mass score suggests. Conversely, if your LDL is moderate, but your ApoB is high, your particle load is dangerous, and you need aggressive intervention, even though your standard numbers look acceptable.
So the immediate actionable takeaway from this whole section is the annual lipid panel isn't enough. You need to ask about an advanced panel that includes both ApoB and LPA, especially if you have any family history of heart disease or stroke.
Getting those two numbers gives you the necessary knowledge to deploy our strategies effectively.
Okay, so that's strategy one. Let's move into it.
Strategy one is our primary proactive tool. When we talk about lowering the mass and the count of those bad particles, diet is the most powerful, non-pharmaceutical lever we can possibly pull.
And when people think about diet and cholesterol, they often jump straight to cutting out red meat or something.
They do. But we're going to start somewhere even simpler and more effective. Soluble fiber.
Soluble fiber. It sounds incredibly basic, but the mechanism you call the sponge effect is actually brilliant. Walk us through exactly how eating a bowl of oats fundamentally changes my cholesterol picture.
Okay, so it's all about interception and removal. When you ingest soluble fiber, which, as the name suggests, dissolves in water, it forms this thick, viscous gel inside your digestive tract.
Specifically in the small intestine.
Right. And this gel is incredibly sticky.
Okay, the sponge is formed. What does it scoop up?
It scoops up two main things. First, any dietary cholesterol that hasn't been absorbed yet. But second, and maybe more importantly, it binds to bile acids.
Bile acids.
Your liver produces bile acids using cholesterol, and they're essential for fat digestion. Normally, after they help digest your food, they get reabsorbed back into the liver to be recycled.
But the fiber sponge gets in the way.
The soluble fiber sponge grabs those bile acids and prevents that reabsorption. It carries them right out of the body.
So the liver suddenly realizes it's running out of the raw materials it needs, the bile acids.
Exactly. The body is always seeking homeostasis. If the liver loses a significant amount of bile acids bound to that fiber, it needs to rapidly produce more. To do that, the liver increases the number of LDL receptors on its surface.
Which act like little vacuums.
Perfect analogy. They act like vacuums, pulling LDL particles out of the bloodstream to harvest their cholesterol cargo for new bile production.
That is a direct, quantifiable mechanism for lowering circulating LDL particles. And the best part is we have a clear, achievable goal for this.
We do. The research shows that achieving just 5 to 10 grams of soluble fiber daily can deliver a powerful, consistent reduction in LDL cholesterol.
How much of a reduction?
Sometimes up to 10% or even more, depending on the person's baseline. That is a clinically meaningful reduction achieved purely through food.
5 to 10 grams, that sounds like a lot until you start listing the sources. Let's give our listeners the actionable food list for this cholesterol sponge strategy.
Okay, the absolute superstars are the grains and legumes. Oats and barley are at the very top.
Why those two specifically?
Because they contain a specific type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan, which is particularly effective at binding those bile acids. Then you have all your beans, lentils, and chickpeas legumes are powerhouse sources.
And what about fruits and seeds?
Don't forget the easy additions. Apples, pears, chia seeds, flaxseed, and psyllium husk. Psyllium husk is often used as a direct supplement and provides a huge soluble fiber boost in just one serving.
That's helpful. But let me ask this skeptical listener question. What if I hate oats? Are there common foods people think are high in soluble fiber but actually aren't? I imagine some people think a slice of whole wheat bread is enough.
That's a great point. Standard whole wheat bread is generally high in insoluble fiber, which is great for, digestive motility.
Keeping things moving.
Right. But it doesn't give you that cholesterol-binding viscous gel effect. You really need those sticky sources, the oats, the legumes, or the supplemental fiber powders.
Can you give a comparison?
Sure. A serving of black beans might give you 4 to 5 grams of soluble fiber. That slice of whole wheat bread gives you maybe 1 gram of total fiber, with very little of it being the soluble type. You have to be specific with your sources.
And the broader context. The American Heart Association doesn't just focus on soluble fiber, do they?
No, correct. The AHA recommendation is for at least 25 to 30 grams of total fiber daily. The key insight here is prioritizing the soluble fiber within that total. You get a dual benefit: improved digestion from the insoluble fiber and active cholesterol removal from the soluble fiber.
Let's use that perfect practical example that ties all this into a single meal.
Okay, imagine starting the day with a fiber-bomb breakfast. You take a bowl of steel-cut oats or buckwheat. That provides your base of beta-glucan.
Got it.
You stir in a tablespoon of ground flaxseed, which adds both fiber and healthy omega-3 fats, and then top it with a handful of berries and a few sliced almonds.
And that one meal gets you pretty far.
That single strategic breakfast easily delivers 6 to 8 grams of soluble fiber. It positions you perfectly to hit your daily 10-gram LDL reduction goal. It just proves that consistency can start immediately.
Okay, so soluble fiber handles removal. Next, let's talk about swapping fats, because this is where the quality of our energy source becomes paramount to our lipid profiles.
This is the second pillar of the dietary blueprint.
Right.
We're talking about a strategy of replacement, not just reduction. We have to stress that not all fats are created equal.
Right.
We want to replace sources high in saturated fat with sources rich in unsaturated fats. This swap improves the lipid profile dramatically.
Okay, so let's clearly identify the fats we must swap out.
We need to reduce or eliminate the fats that are solid at room temperature and primarily raise LDL. These are the saturated fats.
Found in things like
Fatty cuts of red meat, high-fat dairy soap butter, cream cheese, and many processed meats like sausages and bacon. We also need to be wary of trans fats and highly processed commercially baked goods and fried foods, though those have been largely banned.
So the focus is on saturated fats.
Focusing on removing saturated fats is crucial, as they slow down the liver's ability to clear LDL from the blood.
And what are the healthy fats we need to intentionally swap in?
We want to focus on the unsaturated category. So you have your monounsaturated fats, the cornerstone of heart health.
Olive oil, avocados.
Exactly. Extra virgin olive oil, avocados, peanuts, and most tree nuts. These fats are associated with lower LDL levels and are cardioprotective. Then you have the polyunsaturated fats.
The essential ones.
The essential ones, meaning the body can't make them itself. This includes the famous omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel, and plant sources like walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds.
What are the dual benefits of intentionally increasing these healthy unsaturated fats?
They work simultaneously on two fronts. The omega-3s in particular are fantastic at lowering triglycerides. They also have anti-inflammatory properties that protect the arterial wall from damage.
And the second front?
Second, many unsaturated fats, especially monounsaturated fats like olive oil, actively help raise your HDL, the good cholesterol.
The scavenger crew.
The scavenger crew that moves cholesterol out of the periphery and back to the liver.
Let's give some specific practical advice for cooking, because I think a lot of listeners still rely on butter or maybe coconut oil for high heat cooking.
A simple, actionable rule is to triage your oils based on their heat tolerance. Extra virgin olive oil has a relatively low smoke point.
So it's best for dressings.
Right. Dressings, finishing drizzles, and gentle sautéing, where you preserve its potent polyphenols. For high-heat applications like stir-frying or roasting, you want to swap up to avocado oil or light refined olive oil.
Because they have a higher smoke point.
A significantly higher smoke point, which will prevent those beneficial fats from breaking down into compounds that are, well, less heart healthy.
Fantastic clarity. To consolidate this whole section, let's list the 5 key food priorities that synthesize both the soluble fiber and the healthy fat message.
Okay, if you are walking out of this deep dive ready to hit the grocery store, here are the top 5 priority groups to put in your cart.
Number 1.
1. Oats and barley. Must-haves for the beta-glucan soluble fiber. Make these your default grain.
Number 2.
2. Fatty fish. Aim for a non-negotiable 2 servings per week to get consistent omega-3 intake. It's critical for lowering triglycerides and fighting inflammation.
Number 3.
3. Legumes. Beans, lentils, chickpeas. They're cheap, versatile, and deliver that potent combination of soluble fiber and plant protein.
Displacing less healthy animal protein.
Precisely. 4. Nuts and seeds. Specifically focus on walnuts, flax, and chia for their optimal balance of polyunsaturated fats and fiber.
And finally, number 5.
5. Olive oil and colorful produce. Use olive oil as your primary cooking fat and ensure a constant high intake of varied fruits and vegetables for antioxidants, which combat the inflammation that initially damages the arteries.
That's essentially the Mediterranean diet, but perfected for cholesterol control.
That's a great way to put it.
We've built the blueprint for what goes on the plate. Now let's transition to strategy 2. The lifestyle factors that powerfully complement and sometimes even override those dietary changes.
Yes.
Let's start with movement. We all know exercise is good, but how exactly does it manipulate our lipid profile?
Exercise is one of the most powerful systemic tools we have. It affects our metabolism and our hormones, not just our muscles. It acts on the transport system itself.
Okay.
Specifically, consistent movement, particularly aerobic activity, has a profound impact on the good cholesterol, HDL.
How does cardio boost the HDL cleanup crew?
Well, aerobic exercise helps increase the production and activity of certain enzymes, like lipoprotein lipase, which are involved in moving fats around. Crucially, it specifically helps raise the concentration and efficiency of the HDL particles.
So your body gets better at the cleanup process.
It gets better at actively removing excess cholesterol from the peripheral tissues and shuttling it back to the liver. Essentially, the faster and more frequent your movement, the more efficient your vacuum cleaning crew becomes at clearing the arteries.
So jogging, brisk walking, swimming, that is directly increasing the efficiency of the reverse cholesterol transport system.
It is.
But you mentioned that strength training is also vital, and it's often overlooked in heart health conversations. Why is lifting weights crucial for cholesterol management?
Strength training is essential because it fundamentally improves overall metabolic health.
How so?
By building lean muscle mass, you improve your body's sensitivity to insulin. And when insulin sensitivity is good, your liver is less likely to engage in the excessive production of triglycerides and VLDL.
VLDL being very low-density lipoproteins.
The precursors to the dangerous small LDL particles, yes.
Oh.
Strength training helps you manage blood sugar and fat storage better, which reduces the raw materials the body uses to create those high-risk particles.
So if I only focus on cardio, I might improve my HDL. But if I ignore strength training, I'm missing that critical metabolic efficiency piece that helps control triglyceride and VLDL production.
You're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. You need both.
And the official recommendations reflect this.
They do. We're targeting at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio per week.
Which is enough that you can talk but not sing.
Exactly. PLS 2 to 3 strength sessions per week, targeting all the major muscle groups. You have to think of this combination as a kind of dual-action medicine.
Okay, now let's talk about the silent saboteur, chronic stress.
Yeah.
I think it's often dismissed as a purely mental issue, but you're saying it has a direct, undeniable chemical impact on our cholesterol.
It absolutely does, and the link is hormonal. We have to frame stress management as being equally important to physical movement and diet because chronic stress drives up this cocktail of hormones that are highly inflammatory and atherogenic.
Plaque forming.
Right.
Walk us through that cortisol pathway again. How does a stressful presentation at work or, long-term financial anxiety translate into higher LDL particles?
Okay. So when you are under chronic stress, your body pumps out elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol is the key player here. Prolonged cortisol exposure signals to the body that it needs easily accessible energy to handle this threat. This hormonal signal triggers the liver to increase the production and release of glucose and fats into the bloodstream.
Including LDL and triglycerides.
Including LDL and triglycerides, it's an evolutionary response designed for a short-term crisis, but when it's chronic, it leads to this perpetual state of elevated circulating fats, actively raising your LDL and triglyceride numbers.
It's a literal physiological betrayal. You can be eating perfectly and running 5 times a week, but if your boss is yelling at you every day, your hormones are forcing your liver to manufacture cardiovascular risk.
Precisely. And the anecdote from our sources illustrates this mind-body link perfectly. The individual saw their LDL peak dramatically during a period of intense grief and high stress, even when their diet hadn't fundamentally changed.
And then what happened?
Then, upon prioritizing active stress management like structured meditation, better sleep, and returning to consistent exercise, those lipid levels normalized.
Without pharmaceutical intervention.
Without pharmaceutical intervention. This is why we say you cannot simply diet your way out of a chronic hormonal imbalance. You have to address the root cause of the stress.
That reframes heart health entirely. It's not just what you eat and how you move.
But how you feel and process your daily life. The cardiovascular system is the ultimate barometer of your internal harmony.
Finally, let's confront the reality of genetics and risk.
Hmm.
We talked about advanced testing, but what do we do when genetics deals a truly tough hand?
This is the critical conversation that separates the general population from those who require proactive and often pharmaceutical intervention. If you've done everything right, optimized your diet, exercise, sleep, and your numbers remain stubbornly high,
You have to consider a genetic component.
you must.
What are the telltale signs of a strong genetic influence?
The clearest signs are a family history of heart disease that struck relatives early before age 55 in men and 65 in women, or having numbers that are simply incompatible with a healthy lifestyle.
And there are specific conditions to look for.
Yes. The main ones are familial hypercholesterolemia, FH, and highly elevated lipoprotein, LPA.
Let's delve a little deeper into FH. What exactly is going wrong at the cellular level for people with familial hypercholesterolemia?
FH is usually caused by a genetic mutation that affects the LDL receptors on the surface of the liver cells. In healthy people, these receptors are the garbage collectors that efficiently pull LDL particles out of the bloodstream.
Okay.
In someone with FH, these receptors are either faulty or just severely diminished in number.
So the garbage collectors are broken.
Exactly. Even though the body is trying its best, the liver simply cannot clear the cholesterol efficiently. LDL levels skyrocket, often 3 or 4 times the normal level, and the arteries are exposed to this massive particle load from birth.
So for these people, lifestyle changes aren't enough.
Lifestyle changes are absolutely necessary, but often only provide maybe a 10% or 15% improvement. They are insufficient on their own, and aggressive pharmaceutical intervention, usually statins or PCSK9 inhibitors, is required early on.
That is the crucial distinction. Genetic predisposition does not mean fate, but it mandates a significantly more aggressive and proactive approach.
You cannot rely on diet and exercise alone to overcome broken liver receptors.
And the same proactive urgency applies to elevated LPA.
Exactly right. Since LPA levels are highly resistant to standard diet and exercise, identifying that risk early allows a doctor to monitor aggressively.
And maybe employ specialized treatments.
Yes, or to treat the other lipid markers even more aggressively to compensate for that LPA risk.
So the actionable tip for listeners who suspect this high-risk scenario is to ask their provider for what kind of monitoring schedule.
The proactive approach requires aggressive monitoring. If you are high risk, you should be asking for testing, including those advanced markers like ApoB and LPA, perhaps quarterly or semi-annually.
Not just once a year.
Not just once a year. That frequent monitoring allows for tiny adjustments to medication or lifestyle before the problem escalates. The earlier you intervene, the less accumulated damage the arteries sustain over a lifetime.
All right, this brings us to our key takeaways.
Dan, we've covered the shift from concentration to particle count, the power of fiber, the synergy of cardio and strength, and the silent threat of stress. Now, let's synthesize the bottom line for the listener.
Okay. The overarching message, in my mind, is that cholesterol management is a dynamic, integrated, and continuous process. It's about supporting your entire cardiovascular system with daily habits, whole foods, and crucially, a deep understanding of your lab work.
An understanding that goes beyond the 4 basic measurements.
Exactly.
That deeper understanding is really the centerpiece of this deep dive. While natural strategies, fiber, movement, stress reduction are vital and foundational for managing the bulk of your risk.
The advanced testing is key.
Advanced testing for ApoB and LPA is the tool that reveals hidden, genetically driven risks that basic panels are guaranteed to miss. Don't leave those blind spots open.
All right, let's use the remaining time to tackle the most common questions our listeners are likely asking right now. Let's start with the most important distinction we made today.
FAQ 1. Let's clarify LDL versus ApoB one last time. Why should I care about APO if my doctor only tracks LDL?
Great question. LDL measures cholesterol concentration, the total mass or weight of cholesterol cargo circulating. It's an important chemical measurement.
And ApoB measures the particle count, the number of individual vehicles carrying that cargo, because heart disease is caused by the physical penetration of these particles into the artery wall.
The number of particles is more important.
The number of circulating particles, the ApoB, is the superior predictor of future risk compared to the total mass, the LDL. If you want predictive power, you want the particle count.
FAQ 2. How quickly can I actually expect to see my LDL number drop once I consistently implement these dietary and exercise changes?
People often expect changes overnight, but the lipid system really requires consistency. However, the body is highly responsive.
So what does the literature say?
We see that individuals committed to maximizing soluble fiber and swapping saturated fats can see measurable, statistically significant improvements in their LDL and ApoB levels within 3 to 6 months.
But that requires true consistency.
Yes, not just a few good days, but a fundamental shift in daily habits, especially hitting that daily 5 to 10 grams of soluble fiber.
FAQ 3. What about supplements? Can they fix this problem if I struggle with the food changes?
Supplements should always be viewed as supportive, not foundational. The research firmly supports a food-first strategy.
But some can help.
Certainly. Psyllium husk is essentially concentrated soluble fiber and provides that same binding action. Fish oil supplements, particularly those high in EPA, are excellent for lowering high triglycerides.
And what about plant sterols? They're marketed heavily for cholesterol reduction. How do those work?
Plant sterols and stanols are fascinating. They work by competing with cholesterol for absorption in the gut. They're structurally very similar to cholesterol.
So they block the absorption sites.
They essentially block the absorption sites, leading to less dietary and bile acid cholesterol being absorbed back into the system. This can be effective, but again, always consult your physician, especially if you're taking statins, as supplements can interact.
Never skip the oats for a capsule.
Exactly.
FAQ 4. Are there gender differences in cholesterol targets, or are the risks the same for women and men?
The standard goal targets for LDL, HDL, and triglycerides are generally similar for both sexes. You're aiming for the optimal range regardless of gender. However, the context of risk changes significantly.
Especially around menopause for women.
Exactly. The sources highlight that women, specifically around menopause, experience a major shift. Estrogen is naturally cardioprotective, helping maintain favorable lipid profiles in premenopausal years.
But when estrogen drops?
When estrogen levels drop during and after menopause, LDL levels often rise sharply, increasing cardiovascular risk substantially. This really emphasizes the need for careful, individualized monitoring and potential proactive intervention for women entering midlife.
FAQ 5. I've already follow a very healthy lifestyle. I'm a runner. I eat clean whole foods. Do I still need advanced tests like ApoB and LPA? Is this deep dive still relevant for the super healthy person?
This is perhaps the most crucial question we've addressed, and the answer is a definitive yes.
And the reason is LPA.
The reason is LPA. If you are a marathon runner who eats a perfect Mediterranean diet, your standard LDL will likely be excellent. However, if you are genetically predisposed to high lipoprotein, a number that lifestyle cannot touch, you still carry a hidden high risk of early disease.
And standard tests are blind to this.
Completely blind. Advanced testing is the only way to uncover that genetic wildcard and ensure you haven't been dealt a tough hand that requires more than just diet and exercise to manage.
This has been incredibly clarifying. The goalposts have really shifted from just hitting a number to truly understanding the particle count and that complex interplay of genetics and lifestyle.
To summarize the ultimate actionable steps to protect your heart over the long haul, we'll leave you with this clear structure.
Okay, let's hear it.
1. Fuel wisely. Consistently hit that 5-10 grams of soluble fiber daily and relentlessly swap saturated fats for unsaturated fats like olive oil and omega-3s. 2. Move and manage. Commit to the 150 minutes of cardio plus strength training. And critically, prioritize stress reduction and quality sleep as hormonal risk reducers.
3.
3. Monitor beyond the basics. Demand the advanced testing ApoB and LPA to reveal your true, complete risk profile.
And finally.
And 4, stay consistent. Recognize this is a lifelong process, not a temporary diet, to ensure sustained health.
Fantastic.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought, something to stimulate your curiosity based on the knowledge we've gained today.
Okay.
Given that elevated LPA is highly resistant to traditional lifestyle changes, if your advanced test reveals that your LPA is significantly elevated, what novel, cutting-edge therapies or clinical trials should you discuss with your physician, knowing that standard advice might only offer partial protection?
I like that. It Pushes you to think proactively.
It pushes you to think about the emerging landscape of precision medicine for these genetic risk factors.
That is a fantastic prompt for continued collaborative exploration with your doctor. And remember, everything discussed today is strictly for educational purposes only. This is not medical advice.
Absolutely.
You must always consult a qualified healthcare provider for specific testing, diagnosis, treatment, and personalized recommendations regarding your cholesterol and cardiovascular health.
And if you're looking for more clear, practical articles on fitness, nutrition, and wellness to help you implement these strategies, you can find resources just like the ones we discussed today, free of charge, over at bfit.ai. It's a great go-to resource to keep you well informed.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into decoding cholesterol. We hope you feel empowered to shift your focus from concentration to particle count.
Stay proactive, stay informed, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.